Last year, Bryan and his wife, Kath Rogers, helped coordinate the Yes on Prop 2 campaign in California. The organization they co-founded, the Animal Protection and Rescue League, has conducted numerous investigations on factory farms, stopped wildlife poisoning in city parks, educated thousands of people about the benefits of a cruelty-free, plant-based diet, and has been instrumental in passing statewide legislation. Bryan has successfully sued shopping centers to defend activist free speech rights, filed lawsuits preventing the destruction of Harborsville birthing and nursing areas in San Diego, and recently, settled a defamation case he filed against a foie gras producer. Wow. Please help me welcome Bryan Pease.
So yeah, a couple of years ago in California, and actually it wasn't just in California, but in agriculture trade journals around the country, you started seeing these apocalyptic messages and statements to the effect that there's something huge happening that we all need to band together and stop, and it's a dam that must not be breached. We have to pool all of our resources and unite as animal agribusiness and stop this thing that's happening. And what they were referring to was Proposition 2, the Prevention of Farm Animal Cruelty Act, which California voters last November passed by a margin of 63.5%. It was California's most popular citizens initiative of all time. And the process leading up to first the signature gathering phase, getting it on the ballot, volunteers, it was a largely volunteer-led effort, unlike any other ballot initiative that you see in California. There were over 800,000 signatures collected, so that's over 800,000 in-person contact. And then in the get out the vote phase, you saw just huge publicity, funds coming in. Oprah did a whole show on it, Ellen did a show on it, the New York Times editorialized a paper. This level of traction and legitimacy for an animal protection campaign, particularly for farm animals, had just nothing like that had ever been seen before in this movement. And I'm very proud to have worked on that campaign. My wife, Kath Rogers, was the Southern California coordinator in San Diego, mobilizing all those volunteers to get out there. And what this campaign did is it really changed the political and social landscape for animals. Now when we're out there and when we're handing somebody a Why Vegan brochure, instead of just looking at it cross-eyed or ignoring it, they'll say, oh yeah, I voted for that. And people automatically connect. Yes, Proposition 2 was very simple in that it required simply that animals on factory farms be given enough space to at least spread their wings and be able to turn around without touching the sides of the cage or another animal. The effect that it had for people to see the images of how these animals are treated at factory farms, that had never been seen on primetime TV. You saw the average voter saw these images in commercials about 20 times up to the election. And it was over $15 million spent on both sides. And it was largely the egg industry that was trying to defeat it, because what the effect that it had is that it ends the use of battery cages in California. So voters had never, the public had just never been exposed to seeing what goes on behind closed doors on a factory farm until this level of support and funding and endorsements were coming in, and then these ads were being aired. And now when we're out there in the community talking to people, they recognize it, and it actually makes it easier to talk to people about the overall message of the other ways, the other horrible ways that animals are abused on factory farms and slaughterhouses. And people automatically connect veganism and reducing or eliminating the use of animals with measures to eliminate cruelty on factory farms. And we saw that during the campaign too, that people would get involved on a level that we had never seen. Just being involved on the ground with a grassroots organization, just the influx of support, something that people could really get involved in and get behind. And these were meat eaters as well as vegans and everything in between. and people start to gradually make changes in their own lifestyle, and it really starts to affect the way people think about animals. We were at a campaign event for Gavin Newsom in San Diego. He's running for governor, so some of us went to an event in San Diego. And he had, I remember back in 2004 when he was running for mayor in San Francisco, he had made some comments that were critical of legislation that we were pushing at the time to ban the practice of force-feeding ducks to produce foie gras. But he had endorsed Proposition 2, as many politicians had. So we went to this event, thanked him for endorsing Prop 2, and at the time we also, and this was just this past year, had a resolution pending before the San Francisco Board of Supervisors that would be supporting this statewide legislation that bans not only the production but also the sale of foie gras after a phase-out period in California. And what we've been doing in the meantime is getting several city councils on board to support the ban, make sure that it's followed and enforced once it goes into effect. So this was pending before the Board of Supervisors in his city, and we knew that he had made some statements that may have been critical a few years back before we'd done a lot of the publicity on the campaign. But he endorsed Prop 2. We thanked him for that. He said, what's next? So I handed him a Why Vegan brochure and said, hey, if you're going to be governor, you have to know what's what's going on in factory farms. And he thought, he took it and laughed and thought it was, and maybe he read it. Hope he did. But this is it's all connected. It's not just a matter of banning specific cruelty, and the worst form of cruelty that's occurring at factory farms is a way that you can really galvanize support and get people behind it, but then you can still keep the message that what we're really going for here is for people to reduce and preferably to eliminate their use of animal products. We've seen now the reorganization. Oh, and by the way, after Gavin Newsom went back to San Francisco, about 2 weeks later, he signed that resolution, and his sister removed foie gras from the Plump Jack restaurants, which were the restaurants that his family owned. So, it's all a process. And, you have to start somewhere, and you have to start at a place that people are comfortable with, and if you can show people, look, these animals on these factory farms cannot even turn around, they cannot even spread one wing. And when voters see that, we've proved overwhelmingly that voters will vote for the animals. And politicians care about two things. They care about money and they care about votes. And we showed with Prop 2 that we can raise money. We went almost toe-to-toe with the animal abusers. They outspent us by about $1 million. But it didn't bring down our poll numbers at all, and the voters went out and they voted overwhelmingly for that initiative. And as a result, the California Senate reorganized. There used to just be the Agriculture Committee, which would be the place where all bills that are designed to ban cruel practices in agriculture go to die. You don't get anything out of the Agriculture Committee because it's run by agricultural interests. Well, it's been reorganized in California now to be the Food and Agriculture Committee, and now they're considering animal welfare, food safety, all these things that agribusiness does not want addressed, and now that is being addressed, and that's as a direct result of Prop 2. And there's also a piece of legislation, AB 1437, which passed the Assembly, passed the Senate committee, and it's it's held over for next year, but it will ban the sale of eggs in California that come from battery cages or that don't meet the specifications of Proposition 2. So the focus of my speech was supposed to be on legislation and education, I think as a counterbalance to direct action. So I want to say a few words about, I did a little calculation about the number of battery cages that there are in California. There have to be about 5 million of them. Under 20 million hens confined in these cages, and there's typically 5 of them confined in each cage, so small that they can't even spread a wing or turn around. If you were to go out and start rescuing hens from these cages and smashing every cage in California, starting now, it would take you 130 years. So, there's no real denying the fact that the businesses that are abusing these animals, they're doing it for money, and they're only going to be stopped when they're forced to stop. But what is the most effective force that can be used? And I would submit that it's the force of the government and government action. The government is the only institution that is powerful enough to be able to stop these industries that are abusing animals. You can go out and you can engage in any action as an individual will be a drop in the bucket compared to what these industries are doing. We need institutional change, and we need vast changes that we can implement. We need more Dennis Kuciniches in the Congress. I don't want just one vegan congressman. We need vegan animal rights congresspeople, senators, judges, prosecutors, you name it. We need to focus on using the democratic process to be able to take down these industries that are abusing animals, polluting the environment, and destroying people's health. So, is there time? Okay. Well, all right. Let me just really quickly then just say that on the topic of direct action and education, when people people do not like bullying tactics, and so we need to be very careful to position ourselves as being on the moral high ground. And when I went into factory farms and rescued foie gras ducks, we brought an LA Times reporter with us and showed our faces. It wasn't Dean, it was Marcelo Rodriguez, maybe you know.
Next time.
So it's very important to position yourself as being as not using any tactic that can then be turned around and have the focus be on the activists and on the tactic that's being used. It's important to show that the animal abusers are the bullies, and they're the ones that the government needs to be responding to, and not animal activists. We had on the SEAL campaign in San Diego an individual who sent death threats to our organization, and we reported it to the FBI. The FBI decided to investigate us, surprise, surprise. But then U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service got in the case because he was threatening a witness to a marine mammal harassment incident. And then the FBI said, all right, we'll look into this. And then they traced the emails, found out that he'd been sending them from the library. And they showed up and they put him in jail for 5 months without bail. And so that's what needs to happen. It's the animal abusers and the people that are attacking animal rights activists need to be the ones being locked up and not activists.